Welcome you all to this special class on Unacademy YouTube platform. Today, as part of our Unlock initiative of Unacademy, we'll be looking at one of the most important topics in our general studies paper, Economy, Agriculture. As you know, every year in both in the mains, we have at least four questions asked from agriculture topic. At least three to four questions are asked from agriculture topic in your economy mains examination. So in section A, they will be asking general studies paper 3, they will be asking at least two questions. In section B, also they will be asking at least two questions. So over the period of next 1 hour or so, what we shall do is we look at all the important problems related to agriculture sector, and we will also see what could be the solutions to all those problems. Please remember, these are the ones which are routinely asked by UPSC in the main examination. That is what we will be doing. Before we start our class, let us look at some of the courses on Unacademy platform which which have been launched very recently, which are to be launched in the coming week also. And you can see on your screen, these are the top rankers of Unacademy, including second ranker, 9th ranker, 10th ranker, 13, 14, 16 and 20th. Between 1 and 20, there are 7 students. Between 21 and 100, 20, and between 101 and 761, you have 143 learners. Then proceeding further, this is one of the incentives that you have got. If you have taken this GS and combo subscription for 1 year or above, you are given 3 months more extension of that subscription. If you are taking that between 24th and 30th, you can see tomorrow is the last day. So just in a hurry and take admission. You will be getting a 3 more months extension also. Then you have also this one combo. If you look at it, GS plus optional, 1 year, the old price was 77,000. Now it is 55,000. You can see very dead cheap compared to what you find in a major coaching institution in Delhi. For 55,000 rupees, you don't even get the optional also. So definitely a very attractive price here. For 2 years, if you are taking classes for 2 years, instead of 1,12,000, it is only 79,775, which is again very less. And if you are studying for 3 years, instead of 1,40,000, it is only 96,956. So obviously a very attractive proposition. Proceeding further, and last month optional courses have started. We also have started our public administration optional on 24th November, as you can see there. And other optionals also, sociology optional, agriculture optional, political science, and IR, and geomorphology, along with public administration. You can enroll in all those courses. You can take GS plus optional combo. And apart from all the discounts that are given, you will also get another discount by giving our code. If you mention our code PKS10, you will get 10% more discount also. And already the courses, the discounts that are being offered by Unacademy, which is very good. Which is very good, right? With the class में हूँ मैं. Oh, अच्छा ठीक है मैं बंद. Okay. I think there is some problem here on its platform, especially in this month of November. We started also our public administration. We started our public administration on 24th November, and similarly, all other options also were started during this period. All other options also have started this during this period. You can take admissions in all these optionals by quoting our code Pavan Kumar's PKS 10. You'll get a 10% extra discount on the fees which are already there on Unacademy platform. Proceeding further, what are the batches that are starting for CSE 2022? You can see that the batches that are starting for CSE 2022 are in a main mission 2022 comprehensive batch, then Hindi medium batch, and also comprehensive course on GS for UPSC CSE Expedition 2022. And then batches for 2023 also they are starting mission 2020 2 years batch for course for JS and Expedition batch English. And then what are the learners journey here? From 1st December to 31st March, it will be prelims or comes mains. 1st April to 31st May, it is prelims only. 5th June is the prelims. 10th June to 10th September, it will be the mains focus. And 16th September, the main examination. This is what the schedule. Similarly, you can see for 2023 also the schedule. Then the free test series for UPSC CSE. This you must have taken the test series Sunday, and if you have cleared that test series, you will be getting free test series for UPSC also. Then UPSC CSE mega comeback. As I said, yesterday the test was also over. You must have taken it. Apart from this, you also have around 20 GS books as per the latest trends of UPSC. These books are given to the students, and they are given free of cost. But this is available only with 1 year and above GS and combo subscription. That means both GS and optional you have to take admission combined together. Then only you will get this subscription. Then you also have iconic subscription, where you will get a lot of benefits: personal guidance, study planner, live mentoring, test analysis, expert guidance, live classes, weekly tests, study materials, unlimited access, structured courses. These are all the benefits that you get with the iconic subscription. Then these are all the courses that are offered by Unacademy on its platform. Then let us proceed and look at what we have been discussing. The topic of our discussion for today, agriculture. As I said, this agriculture topic is very important from our examination point of view. A good number of questions are asked both from in a section A, section B, and also in your prelims also. Let us see what are the major issues with agriculture, why agriculture is important, what are the reforms implemented by the government, and what are the reforms that needs to be implemented by the government also. So let us look at all those things over the next 1 hour or so. Right. First and foremost, why agriculture is very important? Agriculture is very important because for the fact that it is very important because this still, if you look at it, more than 50% of our population still dependent on agriculture for their survival. 50% of our population are dependent on agriculture for their survival. Then contribution of agriculture in the GDP is coming down, but still agriculture and allied sector contributes significantly to the GDP of our country. Agriculture is important from 2 dimensions. As we study in economics, it is important from the dimension of supply as well as demand, from the dimensions of producers as well as consumers. What are the big things that we are talking about here? The food security of the country depends on our agricultural output. In early 1960s, India faced severe food crisis. We had faced the food crisis. The crisis that we faced was so severe that they were so severe that we have had no option but to import food grains from United States of America under PL 480 agreement. It was what we call it as ship to mouth existence. That is when it was decided that India should never face those kind of problems again. And thankfully, we had implemented the Green Revolution. Swaminathan is the father of Green Revolution in India. Thanks to this Green Revolution, by 1970s, India has achieved self-sufficiency in grain production. But even though we have achieved self-sufficiency in grain production, the problems of farmers have not ended. There are so many problems faced by the farmers. And in the last 60 years or so, their problems have only increased, in spite of the fact that every government that had come to power since then always spoke about making the farmer the center of their policies, economic policies. Still, the problem is the farmers have simply there are so many problems that are faced by our farmers. So let us see what are the problems faced by Indian agriculture. Once we know the problems, it is very easy for us to come out with the solution also. First and foremost, the first problem, as we say, is small size of land holdings. More than 89% of our land holdings are very small. We call them as small and marginal farmers. Those who have less than 1 acre of land, those who have less than 2 acres of land, we call them as small and marginal farmers. Why the size of land holdings is coming down drastically? Average size of land holdings is coming down drastically because of the second point that we talk about here, fragmentation of land holdings. And what happened was, since independence, our population had more than increased by more than 4 times. The land remained the same, but the population went up like anything. And what is the outcome? The outcome is that we have seen a huge amount of fragmentation, division of land holdings. For example, in a family in 1950s, a person has say 20 acres of land and he has 4 sons, and each of them would get 5 acres of land. Then the son who got 5 acres of land will have again 4 sons. Each of them again will get only 1.2 acres of land. That is how the farmers, these land holdings had the size of land holdings had come down drastically. Average size of land holdings. More than 89% of our farmers are what we call small and marginal farmers. With 1 acre or with 2 acres of land, what can they do? Can they introduce innovations? No. Can they use technology? No. Can they use machinery? No. Can they improve their productivity? No. Can they make their agriculture remunerative? No. For almost this 89% of farmers, agriculture is only at the end of the day what we call sustenance agriculture. That means whatever that they are earning from agriculture is barely enough for them to survive on their own. It is barely enough for them to survive on their own. In fact, what you can say is that it is not even enough for them to survive also. Why? Because this is what we say, average Indian farmer is what we call the net buyer of food grains. This is very important. Average Indian farmer is net buyer of food grains. What do we mean by that? Whatever that is produced by average Indian farmer is not sufficient to for his own consumption, for the consumption of his own family. What he has to do? He has to buy food grains from the market to survive also. This is the kind of you know this is the kind of what we call status of average Indian farmer. This is the kind of status of average Indian farmer. Why this had come up? As I said, because you know you know because of the fact that the land holdings had become fragmented over a period of time. These land holdings since independence, due to very high increase in the population of our country, had become fragmented. So it becomes almost impossible for the farmer to survive on his own. We are yet to find a solution to this problem. When we talk about agrarian reforms, we should talk about the small and marginal farmers. Next problem with in, this agrarian community in our country is most of the farmers are what we call tenancy farmers. What we call it as contract farming. What do we mean by that? These the real landlords have migrated to urban cities and towns, and they had given their land to the tenants, to the land tillers, what we call the farmers. And these tenants are cultivating the land. Once the cultivation is over, they will share the output with the producer. They are expected to pay some amount of rent for the use of the land here. Now, what is the problem here? The problem here is that the land is still registered in the name of the landlord, and these tenants are tilling the land. Tomorrow, if they have to get credit, tomorrow if they have to get loans, there is no way that they can get the loans from institutional sources. This is where we talk about agricultural credit. What do we mean by that? What do we mean by that? There is no way that they can get loans from what is called banks. The government has a policy of providing loans to the agriculture sector through public sector banks. That is the reason why in 1969, Indira Gandhi had decided to nationalize 14 banks. In 1980, she nationalized 6 more banks. 20 banks were nationalized. The basic objective is to provide credit to agriculture sector at subsidized rates. They are given credit at what we call DRI, discounted rate of interest, the farmers. In this year's budget also, if you look at it, in the budget of 21-22, our central government has boasted that they are providing 15 lakh crores of rupees of loans to the agriculture sector, which is really good, which is really noteworthy. But who is taking those loans? Who are the ones who are taking those loans? Most of the loans are going to these absentee landlords. On paper, all of them are farmers only, but the real cultivators, the real tillers of the land, do not get the credit. Why? Because they don't have the land documents. They don't have the land documents. And this is more so in case of what we call small and marginal farmers. More so in case of these small and marginal farmers. These small and marginal farmers, they had no option because they don't have land documents with themselves. They have no option but to approach the local money lenders, the local landlords, to give them loans. And what do? They charge huge amount of rate of interest from these small marginal farmers. The ultimate objective of the government, that is to help the real tiller of the land, either by giving him a subsidized credit, was never achieved. And what do these absentee landlords who stay in cities and towns, what do? They take those loans at very subsidized rates of interest, and they use that money for other purposes. On paper, you can say the government is giving 15 lakh crores of rupees of loans, which the government can proudly say. But in reality, how much amount of money is reaching the small and marginal farmers? This is where another issue here. Again, going by the government statistics only, we are going by only the statistics provided by the government. Going by the government statistics only, what you can see here is that out of this around 90% of small and marginal farmers, 60% of them do not have access to what we call institutional credit. That means the credit provided by the public sector banks, regional rural banks, so on and so forth. 60%, that means if you take the overall farming community, 54% of them do not get loans from these institutions, and they depend on the credit provided by the local money lenders who charge huge amount of rates of interest. This is what we say another problem in the agriculture sector. Of course, the government has brought in tenancy reforms. Niti Aayog report also talks about this tenancy legislation, tenancy act. As part of this tenancy reforms, what do we say here? As part of this tenancy reforms, what we say that these tenants, if they have this written agreement contract with the landlords, they can approach the banks and they can get their loans also. These tenants, they can get this tenancy reforms bills have been passed by most of the states, but at the ground level still it is a problematic thing. Why? Because there is no clear what we call an updation of land records. In most of the states, this updation of land records has not been done. One is updation of land records, second one is digitalization of land records, so that it becomes easier for the banks and other institutions to provide subsidized credit to the agriculture sector. But unfortunately, this has not been done. Unfortunately, this has not been done by most of the state governments also. Another problem, as we have said, is agricultural credit. Since this agricultural credit is a major issue, as I said, most of the farmers are into debt trap. They are into debt trap because they are taking loans at very high rates of interest. There's what we call in villages, in rural areas, we have these money lenders and others. They ruthlessly exploit, and middlemen, they ruthlessly exploit these farmers. Next problem with the agriculture sector is with the green revolution. What we have seen is use of this HYV seeds, high yielding variety of seeds. In late 1990s, this is the essence of green revolution, high yielding variety of seeds. But what we have seen in the last 30 years or so is that this use of HYV seeds started having a negative effect, because they consume a lot of water. It increases salinity of the soil. It reduces the fertility of the soil after some point of time, and it also becomes pest resistant also. So that is when farmers are having problems with this HYV seeds. There are so many apprehensions regarding farmers regarding this BT cotton, BT brinjal, and others. Most of the farmers faced severe problems also. Then proceeding further, I said green revolution, as pointed out by MS Swaminathan. Green revolution has been transformed into what he called it as a greed revolution. GREED, greed revolution. Initially, this green revolution has led to what we call increase in. It has led to increase in output, thanks to use of high yielding variety of seeds, thanks to irrigated land, thanks to the use of machinery, thanks to use of pesticides, thanks to a better storage and marketing facilities. Everything was good. But after some point of time, what happened? The farmers wanted more from the land. That resulted in what we call greed. So they started using excessively the pesticides, fertilizers, and other there's a technological innovations. And what happened? Excessive use of them had resulted in, as we have just mentioned now, decline in the salinity of the soil, increase in the salinity of the soil, decline in the fertility of the soil. This green revolution, which has transformed into green revolution, had also a very major impact on environment, also ecological systems. Green revolution, as we know, had taken place in two crops only. Please remember that question was asked this year in mains examination, that is last year, 2020. It has taken place in two major crops. One is rice and wheat. And these crops require a huge amount of water. And the farmers are using flood irrigation techniques, because of which we have seen, what we have seen is excessive use of water. Please remember, even after 75 years of our independence, only 45% of our agricultural land is irrigated. Only 45% of our agricultural land is irrigated, right? Sunidhi, it is greed. This is what exactly Swaminathan also says. It is greed, because they think that the more they use these fertilizers, pesticides, chemicals, they believe that they can increase their output and productivity also. That is what is called a great revolution. It resulted in the excessive use of fertilizers, pesticides, chemicals, everything else, and that has caused more damage to their crops, more their land, in the long, medium and long period of time, because they have seen good amount of profits. They have seen good amount of profits through green revolution. Suddenly it has become what we call green revolution. This is what then happened. Green revolution had become green revolution, which ultimately led to serious questions about sustainable agriculture. Can we sustain this kind of exploitation of our land by farmers, by using these fertilizers, chemicals, and everything else? Obviously, it is not. On the other hand, as I mentioned, only 45% of our land is irrigated. Remaining 50%, 55% depend on the monsoon for their survival. So, what did they do? Most of the farmers, they have opted for what we call tube well irrigation. What we call tube well irrigation. And they started digging the land, going very deep inside the land. In some states, they are going even 1000 feet also below the ground level, 1500 feet also, to find water. To find water. In some states, instead of water, what you can see that was coming was, in some states, instead of water, even petrol, even oil was also coming. You can imagine how how much exploitation of this groundwater resources had taken place thanks to this green revolution of our farmers. And we also have only what is called flood irrigation. We have only what is called flood irrigation. That means the farmers using this tube wells, farmers using other irrigation techniques, they flood the entire land, entire agricultural land. So the water will be there at least 2-3 feet, and this results in what we call excess use of water. As economic survey rightly pointed out some time back in the last year's economic survey, it has said that among all the BRICS countries, India is the country which uses a huge amount of water to irrigate the land for agricultural purposes. And it has said that per acre, per one per productivity, per output, India has highest use of water. And obviously, the country is facing so much of problems related to drinking water also. On top of it, almost every state government in India started giving what we call every state government in India started giving what we call free subsidies to agriculture sector. Every state government started indulging in what we call competitive populism. As part of free subsidies and competitive populism, what they have done, they have given irrigation free of cost water, and they are given electricity, power also free of cost. And in most of the states, what we have is only these tube wells. And the meters are not also even fitted to the motors of the farmers. Meters are not even fitted to the motors of farmers. So the state government simply do not know what is the amount of water used by the farmers. They do not know what is the amount of electricity consumed by the farmers. They are in completely dark about all these things. And every state government continues with these completely economically irrational policies in the name of what we call political populism. Every state government believes that they must show their commitment to the farmers. They must show their commitment to the welfare of the farmers. So what do? They simply give these subsidies completely irrationally. This is where again the problem is. And who benefits out of all these subsidies? Again, it is only the rich farmers who benefit out of all these subsidies. It is not the poor farmer who will benefit out of these subsidies, because if you have only 1 acre of land, where the question of using motors in 1 acre of land. If you have only 2 acres of land, again where the question of using motors. So all those big farmers, large farmers are the ones who benefit out of these subsidies. As rightly pointed out by Planning Commission earlier, what we can say here is that out of every 100 rupees spent by the government on providing subsidies in the agriculture sector, only 6 rupees reached what we call the poorest of the poor farmers, what we call them as small and marginal farmers. Out of every 100 rupees spent by the government on subsidies. On the other hand, out of the same 100 rupees spent by the government on infrastructure, in the agriculture sector, in terms of storage and marketing facilities and everything else, it has benefited poor farmers, small and marginal farmers by 92 rupees. You can understand. But again, as I said, unfortunately, what we are witnessing is competitive populism. Every political party gives more subsidies, much more subsidies to the agriculture sector, to the farmers, knowing fully well that most of them are going into the hands of rich and large farmers who do not at all require those subsidies. Whereas the poorest of the poor farmers are simply kept out of this welfare state. This is what we say again. For example, in most of the states recently, they had come out with some of the schemes. For example, in Telangana, they had come out with a scheme called Raitu Bandhu. That means Raitu means farmer, Bandhu means relative. So the state will be the close relative of the farmer. As part of this, the state government has given cash to farmers. If you have 1 acre of land, you will be getting say 2000 rupees. If you have 10 acres of land, 20,000 rupees. If you have 100 acres of land, you can imagine the kind of money you will be getting. And who benefited out of all these things? Again, absentee landlords. All those big, large farmers who had hundreds of acres of land, who never really bothered to cultivate the land, they got lakhs and lakhs of rupees being credited into their account. And the government says that the scheme is extremely successful, highly successful. This is where the problem with the subsidies. This is where the kind of problems that we see with the subsidies. Most of the subsidies are going into the hands of undeserving rich sections of society. Especially this irrigation and power subsidies, which are given by almost every state government in India. Irrigation and power subsidies. Then proceeding further, Whereas I said, poorest of the poor farmers, they suffer because they do not come under this welfare state because they are not the owners of the land. They do not benefit out of the subsidies because their land holdings are so small that they cannot introduce all these modern innovations also. They cannot think of having a separate motor for themselves with 1 acre of land. They cannot think of having these motors with 2 acres of land. It is only the rich farmers, large farmers, influential farmers who are the ones who are benefiting out of these subsidies. And everyone knows these things, but everything is happening in the name of what we call political populism. Next problem is the storage facilities. If you look at the storage facilities, that is where the problem is. For example, rice and wheat, they are procured by Food Corporation of India on behalf of the government. The government of India announces before the beginning of the Kharif season and Rabi season what we call minimum support price. That means the government would be telling the farmers, especially rice and wheat, paddy farmers and wheat farmers, that this is the minimum price that you can get for your output, so that they can plan their production, they can plan their future output also. This is what we call minimum support price. Then at the time of procurement of the output, they will come out with the procurement price also. Normally this procurement price will be higher than the minimum support price, MSP. Now what is happening is that the government of India announces MSP for 23 crops, including sugar, you can say 24 crops. It announces MSP for these 24 crops. Out of these 24 crops, the government collects this food grains. The government collects food grains only for the government collects food grains only for these two crops, rice and wheat. The basic problem here is that in India we are yet to come out of the mindset of 1970s, 1960s. In 1960s we had faced so much of crisis, the food crisis, that it has made us completely unstable, uncertain, insecure about our future. From then onwards, we started storing those food grains. From then onwards, we started storing those food grains, more food grains, much more food grains. We started storing all of them. And why? Because what will happen in the future? Tomorrow there is any scarcity, what will happen? So that is the reason why even the MSP is announced for 24 crops, the government at the ground level implements it only for two crops, that is rice and wheat. The government collects this rice and wheat from the farmers at their doorsteps, and they will pay the farmers the amount of prices that the government has promised. In this year itself, the government of India spent, in fact, Food Corporation of India has spent around 2,50,000 crores of rupees to pay MSP to the farmers. Can you imagine? 2,50,000 crores of rupees is a huge amount. Food Corporation of India has spent this much amount of money. Now, after FCI purchases this output food grains, where they are stored, FCI simply do not have godowns in the country to store such a huge amount of food stocks. So what happens? They are mostly stored in open. Millions and millions of bags of food grains are stored in open, under the sea, under the light, under the shade, under the water. Imagine there is some rainfall during the night. What happens? Entire storage would become redundant, because paddy and wheat, once it becomes wet, it becomes difficult to sell in the market. Every year we are losing a huge amount of food grains because of absence of storage facilities. Why? Because most of the storage facilities are in the public sector only. Private sector is not encouraged to construct godowns. Of course, recently the government has changed policy. We'll talk about them also later. Private sector is not encouraged. This is about food crops. What about the vegetables? What about the fruits? What about milk? These are all what we call perishable commodities. What do we mean by them? Perishable commodities means they cannot remain fresh for more than 24 hours. Take the case of milk, especially during the summer season. Milk cannot remain fresh for more than it cannot remain fresh for more than say even 4 5 hours also. You need to have cold storage facilities. Same is the case with vegetables. Same is the case with fruits. You will be surprised to know. Right now, tomato prices are have skyrocketed. In some states, they are selling at 150 rupees also. But you will be surprised to know that not even 10% of our tomato output will reach the consumer market. Remaining entire amount of tomatoes are destroyed during their transportation. Why? Because we don't have any storage facilities. India badly lacks this storage facilities. Yes, India badly lacks storage facilities. That is the reason why even though India is one of the largest producers of these vegetables and fruits, we are not able to benefit out of it. We are not able to, our farmers have not been able to benefit out of it. Why? Because let us assume that there is excess excess output in a particular year. Then what happens? Immediately the farmers are forced to sell to the middlemen. They are forced to sell them to the middlemen at very low prices. Last year, before last year, you'll be surprised to know that farmers were sold to sell these tomatoes at 50 paise per kilo also, per kg. Now in the open market they are selling at 150 rupees. Farmers are forced to sell at 50 paise. Why? Because we don't have any cold storage facilities. Excess output means the prices will crash. The prices will automatically crash. And this is where again the problem is, because ultimately the producers, they are not able to benefit out of they are not able to benefit out of this excess output, and we don't have any facilities to export the product also to outside the country, because we don't have any storage facilities and we don't have any marketing facilities. This is where the problem. As I have mentioned repeatedly, public investment in agriculture since the 1980s had come down drastically. What do you mean by public investment in agriculture? It means investment by the government in agriculture sector. Investment by the government in agriculture sector. It had come down drastically since 1980s. How can the government invest in agriculture sector when agriculture is completely a private business? The government can invest in agriculture sector in the form of investing in irrigation facilities, in the form of investing in construction of roads for better transportation facilities, in the form of storage facilities, both cold storage houses and the normal warehouses also, in the form of investing in better marketing facilities. This is where the government has failed to perform its duties. It is where government has failed to perform its duties, because of which ultimately it is the small and marginal farmers who are losing out. For example, they are growing these vegetables or fruits. Since the shelf life is very small, they are forced to sell them to the middlemen at throwaway prices, and these middlemen will sell them in the open markets for astronomical prices. And who will benefit out of this entire transaction? Ultimately, it is the middlemen who will benefit out of it. The farmers who are working so hard in the agricultural field day and night ultimately will not benefit out of the output he is producing. This is what another problem that we see in the agriculture sector. Next problem is insurance, agricultural insurance. This insurance is always going to be a major problem. Why? Because why this insurance is always going to be a major problem in the agriculture sector? Why? Because As I have said, only 45% of land is irrigated. Remaining 55% depend on the monsoon for their survival. With such highly uncertain future, will the private sector insurance companies come and insure the agriculture, insure the farm output? Obviously not. This insurance is desirable but very difficult to implement. Very difficult to implement. So the government is forcing the private insurance companies to come and invest in agricultural insurance. Because of the push by the government, these private insurance companies had come forward to invest or to insure agriculture sector. But what they have done is that they have put very high premiums to be paid by farmers so that in the future they can cover their losses. The premium charged by the private sector is so high that average Indian farmer cannot even imagine about getting his crop insured. And who will get this kind of insurance? Again, rich farmers. Please remember, the government will come out with the best of intentions in terms of implementing the reforms. Ultimately, it is the rich people who will benefit out of the so-called reforms. And that is where again another issue, insurance for the products of agriculture, the markets of the farmers. Next problem that we talk about is, next issue that we talk about is contract farming and corporate farming. Contract farming and corporate farming. What are we talking about here as part of contract farming and corporate farming? This is one of the items of the three farm bills. Now, what is the problem here is that, as I said, the small farmer, the marginal farmer, does not have any capital to invest. He does not have any money to improve the productivity. He does not have any technology to improve the productivity. This small and marginal farmer. That is the reason why it was decided that this small and marginal farmer can be getting the necessary assistance through contract and corporate farming. Let the corporates come and invest in the agriculture. Since the government is not investing, let the corporates come and invest in agriculture. The government is only focusing on what we call subsidies. It is not investing. So the government has said that let the private sector come and invest in the agriculture sector. How? Let these corporates set up these warehouses. Let these corporates establish cold storage houses. Let these corporates enter into contract with the farmers regarding the output to be produced. Let the corporates pay money to the farmers for output. Let the corporates share the profits with the farmers also as part of this contract. It looks very good on paper. It looks very good on paper. As we can see, there is so much of opposition to these reforms. Three farm bills from the states of Haryana and Punjab. And the rest of the country, there was no, there was not much of any noise also. In Haryana and Punjab, it was completely opposed. In the rest of the country, nobody took notice of it. If there is so much of a goodness about this contract and corporate farming, what is the reason why there is so much of what we call disinterest shown by the farmers? Why? Why there is so much of opposition? For the simple reason that what we call is a huge amount of trust deficit that exists between the farming community and the corporates. For example, when this contract farming and corporate farming was implemented in a state like Gujarat, Pepsi, it has asked the farmers of Gujarat to cultivate onions because they are needed for the chips that we eat, that for junk food chips, potato chips. So Pepsi has decided what kind of potatoes to be grown. It has decided the quality. It has decided the techniques. Everything was decided. So the farmers had cultivated and they had come out with the potatoes. Once everything was done, they looked at the quality and they said that they will not buy it because it is not up to the mark. And that is where it resulted in what we call the conflict between the farmers and the multinational company Pepsi. Finally, Pepsi had to close down its operations in Gujarat. So farmers simply do not have what we call a good experience with these corporates. The government has said that they will come out with so many provisions in the contract that the corporates will have to purchase the output under all circumstances. But again, the corporates, they are very powerful. Their capital runs into thousands of crores of rupees. A farmer who is earning thousands of rupees, can he fight with a corporate which has lakhs of crores of rupees at its disposal? Obviously not. That is the reason why farmers are not at all in favor of this either corporate farming or contract farming. They are not at all in favor because they believe that initially these corporates would offer them huge amount of prices to attract them. And this is where again you talk about the MSP, minimum support price. Why farmers are asking for legalization of this MSP? If MSP is not legalized and if you allow this contract farming and corporate farming, what happens? For example, take the case of rice. Per bag of rice, the government has announced, say, 500 rupees per bag of rice. Just for example, I am giving you for you to understand. This is the MSP announced by the government. And what do these corporates do? In order to wean away the farmers from selling their output to the government through this MSP, they will announce 600 rupees. They will announce 700 rupees. Then what will the farmers do? Farmers will always go to these corporates saying that these corporates are giving us more remunerative prices. They will do it this like 2-3 years because these corporates have very deep pockets. They have a huge amount of money. They will do like this for 3-4 years. Then what happens? The government every year announces it, and nobody is selling the food grains to the government. After 3-4 years, what will the government do? Government says that since nobody is selling the food grains to the government will say that we are closing down Food Corporation of India because it has become loss-making one. Nobody is selling their output to the government through Food Corporation of India. Once FCI is closed, what happens? Then immediately these corporates will have monopoly over the prices. Immediately next year, they will offer only 200 rupees to farmers. They will offer only 300 rupees to farmers. Because once they gain monopoly, this is not what we call monopoly. In economics, we call it as a monopsony. That means single buyer. Single buyer. And that is the reason why this contract and corporate farming has been strongly opposed by farmers. They say that without having this necessary safeguards, they cannot have faith in this corporation. If you see, that is the reason why last year there was so much of anger against Reliance Jio in Punjab. Reliance Jio had to come out and say that, to clarify that they have no plans to enter into agriculture sector. That is the reason why now, if you look at it, even after the government has repealed the farm laws, farmers are not willing to leave the place, leave Delhi. They say that give us guarantee on legalization of MSP. That is what the farmers are asking. Why? Because if there is no legal status to this MSP, what happens? Tomorrow the government can discontinue MSP at any point of time, saying that we will, saying that corporates are offering better prices, so we don't let the market decide the prices. That is where, this is where we say trust deficit. This trust deficit can become a serious issue, serious matter also. So this is when we have problems with contract farming and corporate farming. Another problem with this contract and corporate farming is that farmers, average Indian farmer, what we say is that is emotionally attached to the land. Average Indian farmer is emotionally attached to the land. These contract farming, corporate farming, they are very good from rationalist perspective. But the basic issue here is that average Indian farmer is emotionally attached to the land. When he enters into a contract, he has this feeling that he's selling his own family, he's selling his own property. They are attached to the land and they don't want to lose any kind of rights over the land. That is the reason why in India we have seen the failure of cooperative farming also. Cooperative farming has failed for the reason that farmers are not willing to lose control over their ownership rights. Even in corporate farming and contract farming, the government is making it very much clear that farmers will not have to give up their rights over the land. But this is only one part of the story. Once they enter into contract or corporate farming, they will have to produce only the crops that are decided by the corporates. That also takes away the freedom of the farmers. And this is when farmers believe that they are losing their freedom and independence. They fiercely protect their freedom and independence. That is another reason why this contract and corporate farming in India has not been successful. And then problem with the cropping pattern also. Since the MSP is implemented only for two crops, almost what is happening is that rest of all other crops in India are not getting any kind of support from the government, administrative and financial support from the government. Even though India has surplus production in food grains, in rice and wheat, we are deficient in terms of pulses, oil seeds, and other cereals. That is where the problem is. Why? Because this we have not changed our cropping pattern in the last so many years. On the other hand, it has shifted from other crops to rice and wheat only, and it has so many adverse consequences also on the ecological systems. Still, we are continuing with it because minimum support prices, as you can see here, are announced only for are announced for 24 crops, but they are implemented only for two crops. This is where again the issue here is. As I said, you can see the last point here. The government is giving excessive importance to food security. That is the reason why even now also, if you look at FCI godowns are overflowing, we have more than almost three times more than the minimum food security requirements for our country. Why? Because as I said, it had become more psychological for the government. What happens tomorrow when we face food security for food in a crisis? That is the reason why you are storing more than two and a half times, three times more than what is needed also. So these are all what we say, the problems in the agriculture sector, and of course the Essential Commodities Act. This is where again the farm bills also have become controversial. Essential Commodities Act, wherein the government will be regulating the prices. The prices are regulated in such a manner that it is only the farmer who is always at the what we call a receiving end, in the sense that he will never benefit out of the prices. This is where all the problems we say about agriculture sector. In our other YouTube classes, we can talk about the solutions also. I think the time is up because we have another class immediately after half an hour and we will be discussing about the industrial sector. So we will stop it here for now and we will meet again in the next half an hour to discuss industry. In our other classes, we will discuss about the solutions also. Till then,